This is Unit 2, Lesson 4, Plant Processes. I am on page 120 in your text. The essential question for this lesson is, how do plants stay alive? By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the processes through which plants obtain energy, reproduce, and respond to their environments. How do plants obtain and use energy? I'm on page 122 in your text. Plants use photosynthesis to change light energy to chemical energy in the form of sugar. Plant cells have organelles called chloroplasts, where photosynthesis takes place. Chloroplasts are made up of two membranes that surround stacks of smaller circular membranes that contain chlorophyll, a green pigment. Chlorophyll absorbs light energy from the sun. Sunlight is made up of various wavelengths of light. Different wavelengths of visible light are seen as different colors. Chlorophyll absorbs many wavelengths, but it reflects more green light than it reflects any other color of light. As a result, most plants look green. The light energy captured in chloroplasts is changed and stored in the bonds of a sugar called glucose. In the same process, oxygen gas is released into the atmosphere. That helps us breathe. So here we have plant absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which we exhale along with other animals, light energy from the sun, water from the environment. Through a process called photosynthesis, it's able to make glucose, which it stores, and oxygen, which it releases. In plants, the extra glucose is stored as starch or changed to other types of sugar such as fructose or sucrose. In cellular respiration, which is the opposite of photosynthesis, cells use oxygen to release stored energy from the bonds of these sugar molecules. This occurs in organelles called the mitochondria. Cellular respiration also produces carbon dioxide and water, which we exhale. So what are the phases of a plant's life cycle? I'm on page 124 in your text. All plants complete their life cycle by alternating between two phases, the sporophyte and the gametophyte. In one phase, plants called sporophytes produce spores by meiosis. These spores are then released. Meiosis is a process of cell division in which each daughter cell receives half the chromosomes of the parent cell. Under the right conditions, spores grow into plants called gametophytes. Female gametophytes make eggs and male gametophytes make sperm. When a sperm fertilizes an egg, they form an embryo which develops into a seed. The seed is released and can grow into a new sporophyte. So we're going to use this diagram to explain how spores differ from seeds. So here we have the gametophyte stage. Spores grow into plants that produce eggs and sperm. The sperm and the egg combine to produce a seed. The seed becomes a sporophyte. In the sporophyte phase, seed grows into a plant that produces spores. We have our spores produced. Our spores then become gametophytes, and it's a continual cycle. So how do seedless plants reproduce? On page 125 in your text. In seedless plants, sperm, which have tails and swim to the eggs to fertilize them, are released in the presence of water. The fertilized eggs grow into sporophytes. Some seedless plants, such as mosses, have visible gametophyte phase. In most seed plants, how do seed plants reproduce? On 125 also. In most seed plants, the sporophyte makes two types of spores, male and female, that grow into microscopic male and female gametophytes. The male gametophyte is pollen, a tiny structure where sperm forms, which can be carried by wind, water, or animals. The female gametophyte produces eggs. Pollination happens when pollen lands on and fertilizes the female plant reproductive structure. So how do flowering plants reproduce? On page 126. Flowers are reproductive structures with specialized leaves called sepals and petals, which can attract animal pollinators such as insects. A stamen is the male reproductive structure of flowers. At the tip of each is an anther, where pollen is produced. A pistil is the female reproductive structure of flowers. When pollen reaches the tip of the pistil, called the stigma, pollination occurs. There is an image in your text on page 126 that shows you all of these structures. A pollen tube grows down through the pistil into the ovary, where one or more ovules contain eggs. Sperm travel into the ovary and fertilize the egg, which develops into an embryo, a tiny, undeveloped plant. The ovule develops into a seed that surrounds and protects the embryo. The ovary becomes a fruit, which protects the seeds and helps them spread. Here we have our stamen and our pistil showing the ovary, the eggs inside the ovule, our pollen tube, where our sperm is. So pollen grains land on the pistil, begin to grow pollen tubes. The sperm travels down the pollen tubes and fertilizes these eggs. Each ovule within the flower's ovary contains a fertilized egg. The petals and stamens fall away. The ovary becomes a fruit. Each ovule becomes a seed. Eventually, the fruit ripens and the seeds are dispersed. Each seed contains a tiny plant. If the seed sprouts or begins to grow, it will become a new plant. So this is a pea right here. We have a snap pea. So how do plants reproduce asexually? I'm on page 127 in your text. Asexual reproduction allows a plant to reproduce without seeds or spores. Part of a parent plant, such as a stem or root, produces a new plant. Plantlets, tubers, and runners are examples of structures that plants use to reproduce asexually. Plantlets grow on the edges of plant leaves. They fall off and grow on their own. Tubers, such as a potato, are underground stems that store nutrients and grow into a new plant. Runners, such as strawberries, are above-ground stems that can grow into new plants. What are some ways that plants respond to their environment? On page 128 in the text. Anything that causes a reaction or a change in an organism is a stimulus. Plants can respond to internal stimuli, such as water levels in the cells. A stoma is an opening in the leaf surface which helps a plant exchange gases and respond to water levels. Stomata are surrounded by two guard cells that open and close the stoma. When open, carbon dioxide enters and oxygen and water vapor exit. The loss of water from leaves is called transpiration. A plant wilts when it loses more water than it can absorb through its roots. When a plant is wilting, its stomata close, preventing further water loss. Plant growth in response to a stimulus is called tropism. Plant tropisms are controlled by plant hormones, which are chemical messengers that cause the changes in cells. A change in the direction of plant growth in response to light is called phototropism. Photo meaning light. Hormones build up in cells on the shaded side of the stem, causing them to lengthen, which makes the stem bend toward the light. A change in the direction of plant growth in response to gravity is called gravitropism. Most stems grow upward, away from Earth's gravitational pull, and most roots grow downward, towards the pull of gravity. Dormant describes the inactive state of a seed or other plant part in which conditions are not right for growth. Some plants shut down during winter or a dry season, living off of stored sugars. Many plants come out of dormancy in the spring, triggered by more direct sunlight, longer days, and increased rain. In season. I'm on page 131 in your text. A plant's growing season occurs when temperature, light, and water conditions favor growth for that type of plant. Out-of-season produce is grown in a greenhouse or shipped out from other parts of the world.